Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Code with Italians, where we fight technical difficulties. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. This time we eventually won, so that's what matters.
Well, I mean,
So far.
So far.
so far, we haven't any feedback from the chat. Can you hear us? Just out of curiosity.
I mean, that's a good question. They should be able to hear us, but you never know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they can't.
Maybe they'll troll us and tell us that they can hear us, and then in an hour we find out that that wasn't true. Why am I giving them ideas?
Oh man, yes, that's the thing. Anyway, so how's everybody doing? Alex, thank you. Welcome back. Ian, welcome to the show. Because
Thank you.
This is the first time that you are here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Jesus Christ. Okay. It was a long day. It was a long day.
It was a long day, yes.
I mean, Sebastiano dragged me in. Oh yeah, let's build something. I was like, okay, we can do it together. Maybe you have more ideas. I was like, yeah, sure. And then I ended up building a Gradle plugin with Kotlin Poet, reading stuff with reflection. I was like, I should be gardening.
A day in the life. Welcome to my.
I was like, this is not what I want to do in life. Why? And then I remember, there's a lot of money, and I don't like to be poor. All the stuff, right? And you're like, you know what? Yeah, whatever.
Eating is always useful.
Yeah, that's the thing. But jokes aside, we had a very nice day, and I learned a lot. So this is the spirit. About that.
Let's learn some more things.
More stuff in the evening. So what are we talking about? Don't tell me, because I created I wrote the tweet. So Material3 with adaptive layout. Huh?
Yes, exactly.
I came prepared.
Yep, Material3 Adaptive. We're gonna walk through some live coding of some of the new components. I think we're specifically going to look at list detail pane scaffold in most detail, but there's kind of three out there that are in beta right now, soon to be stable, which are list detail pane scaffold, navigation suite scaffold, and supporting pane scaffold. I got them all, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this is great because I heard that this thing was existing, that I heard that someone was working on it and was coming out, and you're like, oh, I can talk about this. Like, yes, I want to know.
Yeah, if you haven't already, there's a full dedicated I/O presentation that Ian put together along with Conrad. So check out that if you haven't seen that already. But also stick around and we'll go through it again in some more detail, and hopefully with a lot more fun examples.
And you can swear, contrary to I/O.
That's very helpful.
It tends to be, unfortunately.
I'm the one that when I publish the recording on YouTube and they ask, is it kids friend? Nope.
No.
It's not gonna be YouTube kids content. So
this
please,
is not one of those channels. No.
No.
I put the link to Ian's I/O session in the chat so people can find it if they want.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, Ivan, do you want to do the Ivan thing and then we can start?
Very quickly, thank you everybody for supporting us. You have plenty of opportunity to just give support. You can subscribe for free to our channel if you have an Amazon Prime subscription. You connect your account and you will see in the app that there is a toggle that says free with Prime. You can support us. We can then, print stickers that Sebastiano and I will give away at conferences. Or if you want to buy our stuff, you can check our coffee page or even our merch store. If you want a hoodie or something like that. If you want to become a monthly subscriber, check out our coffee page. We have a few tiers. Some of them will allow you to access the private channel the private Discord server and the private chat that we have after every show. Most of the time, when Sebastiano creates the clickbait thumbnail for the YouTube recording, and you can chat in a bit
Piece of
more
art.
private way. Piece of art, yes, most of the time. With our guests, if you want. So thank you again. If you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe and like. And yeah, let's go.
Okay, so first of all, I think before we get started, I know the answer to this, but the question is, why does this exist, and what problem does it solve?
You want to start, Ian?
Sure. Yeah, so if you haven't noticed, Android runs on a whole lot of devices these days. And one of the big challenges is that developers and designers and PMs frequently just think of the phone because that's what you're using all the time. That's typically what's right in front of you. But of course, users can be running on all sorts of things. Like one of my favorites is this giant tablet that's, I don't know, like 13 inches or something. It's absurd. But if you just stretch out a phone screen onto that, it's absolutely terrible and you'll make me sad. So don't do that, please. So these composables are meant to solve some of the most common problems that people have when trying to translate, thinking about a really tiny window size up to a much bigger window size. So I think of them as two different pieces. So one is navigation suite scaffold, and that's the part that changes your navigation UI, typically between like the bottom nav that you frequently see on a phone or a small window where the main nav's down at the bottom, you tap the icons to switch, to what you'd more commonly see on a tablet or a larger window, which is the navigation rail on the side. And that just works a lot better because people are typically holding a tablet, on both sides, and their thumbs can reach the sides, but not the bottom. So that one's really easy and straightforward. The other two are meant to control showing multiple panes at a time. So list detail pane scaffold is the one that shows, a list on the left and content on the right. It also technically supports a third pane if you want to really customize things. But the idea is that on a smaller window, like on a phone, it'll show the list. You tap an item, it'll then show the detail. Pressing back goes back to the list, just how you'd expect today. But on a tablet or a bigger window, it'll automatically show them side by side, and you don't have to worry about all the custom logic yourself. It'll just do that for you. Supporting pane scaffold is very similar. The difference is just the intent of where you'd use it. So supporting pane is like maybe you're showing a details page and you have some related content. Maybe it's like a movies page and you want to show similar movies off to the side. So you would do that with the supporting pane. And underneath both of them, they use what we call 3-pane scaffold because they each support 3 panes. So as Alex goes through list detail pane scaffold, basically everything he says will also apply to supporting pane scaffold. The APIs are almost the same. It's really just like the intent of the user experience that's different. Is that everything, Alex? What did I miss?
I think that's everything, yeah. Actually, I think one thing to just talk about adaptive of why that's in the name, and also maybe like responsive versus adaptive, if that's a question. Like, I think we're all pretty comfortable with not hard coding dimensions at this point. Like, screens of different sizes, we're aware of that. But usually what that ends up turning into is like your layouts just kind of stretch. Like everything gets a little bit bigger. You, instead of having like, you ensure that you have some padding and then it fills the rest, but then it just keeps filling. And when window size changes a little bit, that's usually fine, like a phone to a slightly different sized phone. But once you start thinking about like a phone to kind of a desktop sized window or anything in between, and devices are just making it more and more common that on the same device, in the same like user flow, you will be switching between as the user goes into multi-window mode or resizes a window on a like tablet or the tablets that have kind of this desktop windowing mode. Like it's very common to have all these resizing. And so just stretching just really isn't enough. It doesn't give a good user experience to go from the same UI just stretched out and stretched back. So the adaptive part comes in of it's much better to actually swap the content that's being displayed in a useful way for the user. not just stretching everything. So responsive is still important. It's still important to not hard code all your dimensions, but so these are some of the first components that help you kind of swap between the components themselves to display different things based on like the window size, how much space is available.
Cool. So I think maybe to get a better idea, we could probably start looking at the code. I don't know. Should I share your screen?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Cool. Let's go. Okay.
Let me know when it's
You're on.
sharing. Awesome. So this is the Now and Android app. So I can actually walk through what we were just kind of describing from what we've already implemented in Now and Android, which is the navigation suite scaffold as well as list detail. So for the navigation suite scaffold, you can see on the side here, we're at a window size that is wide enough in order to display a nav rail. And then when the window size shrinks, eventually we get small enough. And of course, now the cat joins.
Cats are welcome.
This is the interesting part. Get in there, cat.
Yep. When the window size shrinks enough, now we swap to a nav bar. So this is one component that's doing both of these things, showing the nav bar, and then based on the window size, swapping to a nav rail. And that's the navigation suite scaffold. So both of these components existed previously, but you'd have to control the logic yourself of which one to show when. And now there's a single component that you use, and it will show the recommended one at the current window size, and then whatever content you have inside. And similarly, we also have list detail pane already implemented here. So this is in the interest section. So we have our list of interests. Right now I'm selected compose, so we have compose as a detail. And when the window size shrinks and there's no longer enough room to display both of them, then we only display one. And then if we go back, we'll go back to the list with an animation, and then we can swap to a different interest. And then if we expand out again, we expand to now see both list and detail together. And now if we go back, because we're seeing both, we'll go back to the home screen. So what back button does kind of depends on the window size, because it's dependent on what is being currently shown to the user. So that's foreshadowing for the actual implementation we'll get into. I'm not going to dive into either of these two directly, although we could look at the code if we have some time.
Sure.
But today I think what'll be fun is in our licenses section, we are using the open source licenses plugin. And so we get this very, very large stretched UI here of showing the list of licenses. And then if we click on something, it's a completely different screen with like, this is kind of perfect for a list detail setup,
Yes.
but is very much not a list detail setup right now. So I thought it'd be fun if we take this example and see how we can implement it using the new component.
That sounds great. Yes. I also like open source licenses lists. I think there's always room for improvement. So why not?
I have a question that I want to. I mean, I'm just very arrogantly jumping in, but people. Yeah, I mean, I run half of the show, so I can kind of.
You got half a question.
Yeah, well, fair enough. So I just want to. I love the idea. It's very interesting, but I have a question about device rotation. Is it gonna take care of the navigation bar by itself when I like rotate my phone or something like that, or is it just, oh, this is a portrait phone and now you have a foldable, or you're just, is it gonna adapt?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it also gets it. This takes advantage of being in Compose, so it can just recompose when the window size changes. So Alex was showing like a free-form window changing sizes, but the same thing is true if you rotate a device. Now the window size has new values and it just recomposes with the new values.
Oh, nice. This is cool. Thanks. You see,
Yeah.
Seb? It was a nice question. It was a good question.
It was. It was a very good question. I was
Thank
impressed.
you. I mean, thanks. Thanks. Wow, the level of trolling is serious. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Alex, please.
Yeah, I should have mentioned the emulator I'm using here is the desktop emulator. And I really like this one to test because it's a fully freeform window environment. So you can very quickly resize to any arbitrary window size that you have. And like, this is kind of the most general windowing setup that you can have with your Android app. So on a phone, you might only have kind of portrait, landscape, and the multi-window modes. On a foldable, you'll have all of those, plus going from inner to outer screen, plus all the multi-window modes there. On a tablet, you might have full screen rotation, all the multi-window modes. A lot of tablets have a freeform windowing environment. Samsung has Dex, Lenovo has one as well. Like, you kind of get this freeform windowing environment. The desktop emulator here is most similar to Chrome OS, which has a fully freeform windowing environment. So I'm using this one just to be able to quickly resize, but the same kind of configuration changes all apply to all the rotation, multi-window. Like, it's all the same code path of anytime the window size changes, you get a configuration change, and that whole process of how configuration changes and recreation happen.
Can I say
So-
I'm a huge fan of testing apps on desktop, especially on Chrome OS, because it has the side benefit of making you think about mouse and keyboard, which it's also something that a lot of people don't think about when they it's just gonna run on a phone. Well, no, not really.
Yep.
So
Another thing that I like to call out is it's also not even necessarily the physical type of the device that matters. Like some of the Samsung phones, it's a phone, but if you plug it into like a monitor keyboard, it turns into a more desktop windowy experience. You can connect a display with an external display. So it's not even necessarily the like physical type of the device of am I running on a phone or a laptop or a tablet or a foldable. It's like kind of the windowing mode, and it's just becoming more and more likely that that is changing or can change at runtime, or your app could be running on a phone but in a full desktop-like environment on a monitor. Which, again, even more important to kind of keep all these things in mind. Like, your app is not going to be used just with a touchscreen. Your app is not just going to be used in a portrait window. Like, users are going to be putting it in different windowing modes, resizing, using different input methods. Like that's just going to happen with your app. It's already happening today. It's just going to keep happening more and more. That's the direction everything is moving in.
Yeah, and I'd also say on top of that, for the most part with Android, if you have that in mind from the beginning, it's not that hard to handle these things. But if you wait a few years until whatever the next thing is becomes really popular, like refactoring your whole code base because you hard coded everything to only accept touch and not accept mouse, suddenly becomes a real pain. But if in the beginning they're both triggered the same way, like you don't really do much extra work and it just works in these other scenarios you might not even be thinking about.
Yep. Good example of that is like the hover that you can hopefully see pass through here. Like hover is important for mouse, but it's also important for stylus, because styluses that are really close to a screen will have the same exact hovering behavior that a mouse would or a touchpad would. Okay, so I skipped ahead a little bit. I had a pre-prepared branch to get us a little bit of the way, which was most of the boring file processing for the licenses plugin. So some slight reverse engineering, and we have now this list available to us. And I can quickly walk through some of that code in case that's interesting. So we have a licenses route that right now
Alex,
is just...
before someone else does this, I'm going to ask you to use the IDE zoom and make everything bigger. Because it is going to happen. Perfect. Thank you.
Is this big enough? Okay.
Yes.
So I set up a new licenses route that is just going to be displaying our list of licenses. Right now, it's just in a lazy column displaying each of them with the name of the library and then a license for it. And this is being handled in this view model. This is the reverse engineering a little bit. That plugin creates 2 resources automatically generated, which has kind of a fun format. So basically, we're just reading it in from the file and putting it into a stateflow, which has our list of library with licenses with some parsing, some fun regex. So I'm going to skip over that a little bit, but now we can get into the fun stuff, which is the UI, because that's always the fun stuff, right?
Yes.
No one likes file processing.
I mean, you can ask Ivan. I think he now has a degree in file processing.
I was about to curse live. Thank you for bringing me in the conversation.
You're welcome.
But I also noticed that, Alex, you are not doing the file processing in a repository with a data source and clean architecture. Uncle Bob is very, 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 very not impressed.
This is why I'm skipping over it. I was just...
Everything in
on purpose.
Prepare to be bashed on the internet. Because...
That's why he was zoomed out in the beginning. You guys ruined that for him.
Yeah. Don't look at this. Don't look at this too closely.
Yeah.
Don't
try this at home.
We could spend the next hour and a half just discussing architecture and patterns and stuff, but
maybe we need another stream for that.
I'm very much on the side of like not super strict and like have to follow all the rules all the time. Like there's time and places to like abstract more where it makes sense.
What do you mean? You don't you usually do 15 layers of indirection just to do a network call? What are you talking about? Alex, please stop.
Sometimes that's useful. Like okay. Let's
go to the
stop trolling,
stuff.
Ivan.
Yeah. No. I want to see some UI stuff. Let's go.
All right. So let's start with let me make sure I have my imports for the adaptive library. So let's start.
You haven't upgraded AGP.
Well, this is sounds like a good time to do that, right?
It's not.
No? Why? What could go wrong?
Also, we're in we're in a large project. We're not in a sample project, so I'm even more scared to do that. All right. Ian, I wonder if you want me to explain what...
Yeah, I can narrate some of this. So the first part Alex did was the remember list detail pane scaffold navigator. It's a big mouthful, but the idea is this navigator helps you control what's going on in this list detail pane scaffold. So it's essentially 2 parts. One of them is the directive that you can think of as the brains that decides the things that we'll go into in a moment. And then the other is the value, which is just like what panes are visible right now. So the directive is what you can use to control everything. So like everything from how many panes at max you want to display to how much spacing there is between them. And the reason all of this is bundled into a navigator is for most cases, you don't want to deal with any of this yourself. You just want your app to work. You want to be able to say, they clicked an item in the list. Now do whatever you should to make sure the details shows. And you don't want to worry about, is there 1 pane? Are there 2 panes? Are there 3? Whatever. And so the navigator gives you the way to do that. You can say navigate to whatever the thing is. It can automatically keep track of the parcels that you pass into it. So it can also manage a backstack as needed. So like on a phone where you need to go actually back and forth between different panes, it will handle that for you. And I guess probably the obvious thing in the list detail pane scaffold is there's a list pane composable and a detail pane composable. So exactly what you'd expect. In the vast majority of cases, you'll have probably a lazy column or a lazy vertical grid or something like that in your list pane, and then just loop through all your items. In this case, this is all the license data, so we can show the name of that license there. And then in the actual detail pane, your details content. So relatively straightforward. And the hope is that for the most part, this will be straightforward because we want this to be as easy as possible.
It looks very intuitive. So
put our lazy column that we had before into our list pane with the list detail pane scaffold. And then the detail pane has a bit of work of basically showing what library we currently have selected. So let's maybe comment this out for now, and let's just run this one step at a time. So the initial kind of state of the navigator will be on the list, which makes sense. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Why?
Bum, bum, bum.
Ouch. You see? Too much infrastructure. I mean, what is that? Dependency injection?
Is
Well,
this
who needs
even where
that?
you take out your coin sticker and just like
No.
you are known
no.
to do that?
No. I don't know what you're talking about. I have a silver coin because that's a silver bullet. Even better, Sebastian. No. I understand that you have constraints when you build things, and I respect that you go through the pain of building things with hilt. So I can only have respect for you.
Yeah. As Hugo is saying in the chat, hey, at least with coin it would have just crashed at runtime instead.
You see, it saves you money and electricity.
Sure.
It's the energy efficient solution.
Can I suggest an alternative thing, which is like pass all the parameters in all the APIs as any, so you don't have class
Yes.
cast exceptions during compilation, only at runtime.
Yep, and that's it. I mean, you can use a hash map like I do, right?
I mean, that's coin.
Yes, it's pretty much it.
So if that's what you want, sure.
Yeah.
Isn't this just working? Didn't I just run this and then I didn't get this error?
I don't know.
Let's try.
I was
Let's try to
trolling
help
Ivan,
this man.
so I wasn't.
Let's try
paying
to help
attention.
this man. Okay, let's try to do something useful. So, what's the error?
So the error is to get this licenses for the to display them. The generated res file that is being created from the plugin is being generated in our app module. But I am in a feature module underneath settings. So I don't directly have access to the resource identifier because I'm in the a feature module, not the main app module. So clearly the solution is to just inject it from the app module and be like, hey, here's the license that's available.
Mm-hmm.
But some form of generated resource file plus hilt plus multiple build variants meant that it broke.
Plus being live.
Well, that's also.
Haha.
Okay,
it works.
We're back.
It works.
I have no idea why it wasn't working.
Yeah, but that's how
of the
hilt
time
works.
it works every time, right? That kind of bug.
Yeah.
All right.
So
we have our list of libraries now on the left here, but we still need the detail. So this is now all running inside. Let's get out of the hilt nonsense. Okay, back to here. So this is all in this lazy column in the list pane. So let's now actually start showing the detail that we have. So the navigator by default is going to show the list pane, which makes sense. Like when you're in a list detail layout, the first thing that you're going to see is a list as the user. Mm-hmm. And then only once you click on something do you actually want to see the detail. So that's kind of clear to see when you're on a compact window size where you're only seeing the list or detail at a time. You start off on the list, you click on something, you want to see the detail. When you're seeing both, because the window size is large enough, then you'll see both together. You'll never be seeing just one at a time. So you'll always be seeing the list. So it's easier to see on a compact window, you're starting with the list. So we actually need to start kind of telling the navigator, hey, when we click on something, we want to go somewhere. So we can do that relatively simply, just adding a clickable to here. Maybe let's add some padding to make us slightly bigger. this isn't going to be the prettiest thing ever, but you saw what we were working with at the very first step, so we don't have to make it super pretty.
Throwing shade already, I see.
I really don't care. Make it work, make it nicer later. So make it work. That's all I care.
All right, so
okay, so on
basically,
the navigator,
Mhm.
So
On
the
the
navigator
navigator-
kind of works the same as the normal navigator, or how does that actually work here? I mean, I'm not asking about the internals, to be clear, as a user.
Yeah. Yeah. So the main idea is that when you're writing this, you say navigate to, you want to give it what is the pane that you're trying to change. So in this case, we've clicked on something on the list, so we want to change what's shown in the detail. So we specify detail pane, and then whatever the content is. So you may have like an ID, like this is details item number 473. So you can have it store that and read that separately. You can also just handle that yourself if you don't have IDs, or kind of whatever. We tried to make this flexible, but yeah, the idea is that the navigator is what will show and hide and move between the panes for you, and you don't have to worry about which panes are being displayed at a given time. You can just say, show this in the details pane. If it's already there, it will update from what it was showing to the new thing. If it isn't there, it will switch over to that pane.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So it works as I was intuitively thinking it would, which is always good, by the way. Thank you for that, because I days since I've used an API that doesn't work the way you think it should.
Yeah, and it is important to note that it is distinct from like normal navigation in terms of like Navigation Compose, which is what now Android's using. It is distinct from it. It isn't using kind of Navigation Compose under the hood to do this navigation. The best way I like to think about it is this is handling kind of navigation in a small subset way, kind of like a dialogue does. Like if you think about it, when you have a dialogue in one place, there's kind of like this isolated navigation separate from your overall navigation structure. Like when you show a dialogue, you press the back button, that's still a back button that's doing something, but it's not hitting back on your overall navigator, it's just hiding the dialogue. So it's kind of that similar realm of having your overall app navigation doing stuff, and then at a specific place, you kind of are handling a bit of navigation manually with this navigator, which is distinct from your overall navigation. But admittedly, it would be kind of nice if those two played really nicely together, which we're working on. It's complicated. It's navigation, and it's navigation in this very like abstract sense of what even is a screen. Like with a list detail setup, you have both a list screen and a detail screen, but now you have both of them on screen together. So now you have multiple screens at the same time. Like navigation libraries very much don't like having multiple things on screen at the same time. They like to have just one, which then adds a lot of like just limitations of what the navigation libraries expect. So all that to say, kind of the simplest approach is don't mess with your overall navigation hierarchy and have just a bit of navigation contained within some kind of overall destination from your bigger navigation setup, and handle this navigator directly.
So in old school terms, the normal navigator is to activity what this detail pane scaffold navigator is to fragments, right? Kind of.
Kind of. No, I mean I saw Alex like having PTSD. It's you can see the exact
I didn't say
moment.
fragment transaction.
Look at it. Just go back to the recording and look at the face, and you can see the like the Vietnam kind of shit. You weren't there. Yeah, that was the vibe there. Sorry, Alex, for this, but
everyone is happy that we're doing Compose today.
Yeah.
Yeah. And And way back in the day, we did have, I think at that point it was called master detail pattern with fragments of switching back and forth. And that involved a lot of boilerplate every single time of hard coding all these different values of like when should these display. So we can certainly say we've come a long way since then.
I thought you were gonna say involved a lot of swearing, but
well, yeah, that goes without saying.
But I want to ask something about the fact that you are stressing the idea of trying to use this in a limited section of the app. Like if you have a good use case for this, try to use this kind of navigation. But I was thinking, so if I can build my app, let's say I'm scrolling through things, right? Usually I'm fetch a JSON and I show it in a feed. 99% of the apps in the world, right? And then you click and you go somewhere else. So in theory, everything is pretty much this, right? A list and a detail screen. Now, if I build my first implementation with this, while I have the list and then the detail, but they kind of don't know, right? Nobody knows because nobody's using a foldable or nobody's running the app on a tablet. You know, it's just like the pretty much the basic startup / product people like, oh yeah, we have an iPhone and turns out now we need also the Android app, make it the same. When they are gonna come up with the iPad version, and I go like, ta-da, motherfuckers, we already have it. Would it make sense to actually start like, you know, in a covert kinda, let's do it before them way, or I'm just gonna shoot in my foot like painfully because, you know, all the navigation is gonna turn and backfire, and then I you know, and just gonna, because I need to know if I need to quit at some point, you know, that kind of exit strategy, right? Would it make sense, jokes aside, would it make sense to start with this approach, knowing that at some point somebody's gonna ask me, oh, how does it look on a tablet? I don't need an answer. I just need a kind of
comforting hug.
Yeah. because that happens so many times, right? And that's unfortunately, and we all can agree on that. But that's a lot of the reality that I worked with. Like, you know, there is iOS, there is Android, and then iPad shows up, and now what? You know?
Yeah, I would say if you do want to go that route, and it makes sense because you like suddenly displaying multiple destinations at the same time can be a big architectural change. So if you're thinking about that from the beginning, you potentially save yourself, you know, weeks or months of headaches. But for sure, I would raise this as a possibility with the designer and PM to say like, hey, look, we can very easily show these side by side now. Is that okay? Do we want to go this route? Because it can complicate other things. So for instance, if you want to have a deep link into the details page, well, now you need to be able to handle deep linking within this component, which isn't out of the box. It's not a huge amount of work, but it would be a little bit of work. And so the more complicated those scenarios are that you need to support, the more it does add up. So we generally do recommend, you know, start with somewhere relatively safe, like the licenses screen is a good example, or like settings where the pattern makes sense. It's safe and isolated. There's not deep nested navigation in those things. If you do it at the top level of your app, then it really depends how deep does the navigation go from there. So if I go to the details page, can I then go to the authors section, and from the authors section go to whatever books they've written, and from books go into something else? And now you have to start thinking, well, how many of those panes should show side by side? Would you show 3 of them? And then once they click something in the third pane, do you swap all of them over one? Or do you go back to two, like it starts to raise a lot of those questions that that don't have like guaranteed answers. It really depends what makes sense for your user experience.
Yeah, but that's not a technical problem to solve. It's more like a UX or like a design problem to solve. But I understand what you mean. I mean, it gets complicated very quickly if you start clicking things. Then nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish
makes
users
sense.
would stop
Thanks.
doing that.
Yeah, I mean,
You're allowed 2 clicks per day. That's it.
But
okay.
yeah, I think you absolutely should be like I think the thing that's the most technical that you should absolutely be thinking about is like your window will be resized, like all the configuration change stuff will be happening, like making sure you're saving state, you're not losing state, you're using view models or using saved instance state to make sure that you're not like rotating and losing all the data in a form. Like that is like that's a way to have an even worse user experience than just having things stretch. So that is kind of distinct from kind of these UX questions. But like, yeah, to Ian's point, like, I don't think you should just ship something that your designers haven't looked at. They probably won't be happy with that.
Well, I mean, they're never happy, and I also don't care. The only
It depends on the company. Sometimes they care.
well, I mean,
yeah,
Chris cares. He's the only one that I really can talk. But then the rest are savages.
Even painting in very broad strokes here, I see.
Oh man, don't get me started. No, because this is something that you will love. I would love to use. I saw this working in Flutter. Oh my god, the F word. But then now we also have it on Android. This is cool. You will love to have this kind of stuff, right? And then the whole circle of trying to sell it to the people that can decide, right? And getting always the same feedback, like, yeah, we don't have an iPad version, so we don't care. And so yes, I want to ship it even if the designer doesn't want it, because also fuck them. Why do we need to come always like a second afterthoughts when we can arrogantly lead?
yeah, it's a really tricky problem. I think maybe one thing to recommend is just like put your app on this situation that users are using it in and being like, this is what it looks like right now. Like that is what users are currently using right now. That is the experience they're getting. Like, are we happy with that? I like realistically, you can't get away from some of those conversations of like return on investment, but what we're trying to do is making it easier, like making more tools to lower the cost of building things like this. And yeah, users are using it in these situations right now, and we're only going to see more cases like this come out. So
yeah, I'd also say like building that relationship between the developer and designer is really important, because there's different reasons they may feel that way. It may just be they've never even touched an Android device, so they've never thought about it, which is frustrating for us because that's what we're thinking about nonstop. But it may also be they think that doing something like this is going to add a month of work. And if you can show, hey, in 5 minutes, I just added this, list detail pane scaffold, and now it looks a lot better, that might also get them more excited about other opportunities for Android.
I think the important thing with this layout is that you theoretically could get away with not having to design anything new apart from what you already have. You already have a list. You already have the detail. You just need to put them one next to the other in a way that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, maybe that's another thing of like how you could prepare for this is like if you can make sure that your detail pane's UI is like fairly self-contained of like here's the inputs it needs to render something. Same with your list, and then like if those are well encapsulated, then you can start kind of shifting them around together in the future to do some of this list detail work.
Yeah, and if nobody ever uses your in the QA or design department or whatever, if they never check your app on a tablet, they will never know. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I can live with that, right? That's the thing, right? And then one day somebody comes and says, "Oh my God, this thing is foldable. What the
Yeah.
fuck?" How? Yeah, it's been there like 16 years now. Oh, yeah, the iPad just got it. Okay, yeah. We have it since 2000. Yes, so I can live with that. But I agree with the being like encapsulated and cohesive from a screen. And then we don't know what a screen is, but you you get the point, right? If I have a list, that works. If I have a detail screen, and now they are kind of on the same page, so that's good. In Spanish, so lo siento, lo siento.
All right. So the code I finished writing here and it ran. So I'm using the index, which is very weird. This is like not what you'd probably normally do. Like
You'd want
an
like an
index of a
ID?
list is like, yeah, ideally we'd have an ID. The only reason why an index works here is we have like a fixed list that's never going to change.
Yeah.
And we don't have a nice ID really. So in almost every situation, you'd probably want some sort of unique identifier here, especially because lazy column wants unique identifiers for the key. So anyway, index is weird, but we'll use it here. So we're navigating to a specific index with the detail upon clicking on an item. And then in the detail pane, we're pulling out the index of the current destination that there is, and then pulling out that library from our data with the index. Again, this is why this is weird. Like if this list were to change and where you were at the index doesn't exist anymore, like that might not work, but it's fine. We have a fixed list. We're either going to have no list or a fixed list that will never change. Remember, they're showing the license. So over here, if I go back and go into licenses, we have nothing on the detail screen right now. And then if we have our list here, and then I click on something, then the right, we have the license that shows up. Then if I shrink down, now we're showing just the license. Eagle-eyed people will spot that we have insets issues. And then if I go back incorrectly, we're leaving this entirely. That's not what we want. So we can fix that. But when we click on something, we go to the detail. So we're part of the way there.
Yeah, and maybe just to highlight on that line 98, the navigator knows what the most recent destination is. So you can just ask through the navigator there. Like you don't have to keep track of the whole nav stack yourself. It's when you say navigate to whatever and you give it some ID, now that's in that composable, since things recompose when those values change, it just automatically updates. So now Alex is going to add the back handler, and it's basically you just pipe it through. If the navigator understands if you've navigated somewhere, so if there's still something on this stack, then you just tell it navigate back. So pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and one other thing to highlight is this not only takes into account where you've navigated before too, but it also takes into account the scaffold directive and the current window size. So if I run this now, we can see that in action, hopefully. Because the back button behavior changes ideally based off of, or it needs to change based on what the current window size is for kind of getting the user behavior that you'd expect. So if I run this, go back into licenses. Now, if we're in kind of two-pane mode where we can see both, if I click on something, then that seems to work. Click on something else. If I go back here, because we're seeing both, we're seeing everything now. Going back here should exit the app, or sorry, not exit the app, exit this destination and go back to where we were before, which makes sense because we're seeing both of them. But if I click on something and we're just seeing the detail, then here going back should go back to the list, which it does. So the back handling behavior here is kind of conditional on the current window size for getting the expected user behavior. If you're on the detail only, going back should bring you back to the list so you can click something else. Where if you're seeing both, then going back should exit both list and detail together. So that's taken into account with the navigator as well, which kind of has all the information it needs to choose this behavior.
Yeah, and that kind of gets to Yvonne's beautiful, perfect question earlier about rotating the device. Is if you say you're on a device where in landscape you do see both of these, and then you navigate to a details and you rotate to portrait because it's a little bit easier to read. If you press back at that point, you'll go back to the list in portrait mode because that's the size of the window size, and we're always listening to that window size for you and recomposing based on that.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's actually very nice.
There's a lot of like behavior in this. Like when you start thinking through all of the situations, it's like you could be seeing list and detail. What happens when you resize and you can only show one versus like what happens if you're showing just the list and you resize down to showing one? What should the back button do in all these situations? Like, I think that's one of my favorite questions to ask design is like, what does the back button do in this situation? It has to do something, and it has to do something useful to the user.
Do you have like a flow diagram? Like, do you remember the fragment life cycle thing? No, but do you have one diagram like that shows you if this and this, if I click back, if this is the state and you click back, something that we could use also to educate the designers, because now you ask the designer, okay, so if we are here, what do we want to do? And then you build it that way. Then I get another designer that, grew up on different streets and they have a different idea about navigation, or, an iPhone is different. It could be nice to have also that kind of resource, like, this is the flow and it makes sense. So just let's go with this.
I believe we have, I don't think it's a flow chart, but I think on Material there's a list of what the back button should do for the list detail canonical layout. I think that's on material.io.
I'm gonna search for it. If I can find it,
Thanks.
I'll share the link.
Thanks.
Yeah, internally we wrote a lot of docs about this and thoughts, because there's a lot of it is kind of, well, it depends, or what do you think makes the most sense? And you could make arguments either way. So we tried to settle on what made the most sense, but I think maybe that's good for us to also explicitly document, especially the situation where your window size is changing. So you're going between showing 1 and 2 panes, which then affects the back button. It's a lot easier to think through. If my window size is static and I'm always showing 1 pane, it's really easy for me to understand what back does. But if I was showing 1 pane and now I show 2, then the behavior should be different. But it's not always something you even think about.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? I mean, if you have something that is a bit opinionated from your side, is also a tool, like a weapon that we can use on our side. Like, this is it, man. Just leave it alone. It works, right? So just go with it. And also I can point out, Gmail is not doing it. That kind of nice passive-aggressive attitude, right? Always fun.
Yeah, very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ivan.
You're welcome. I'm in a mood. So you can see that, tomorrow I'm off for 4th of July, so I'm very happy.
Yeah. Then we have a task to go talk to Gmail and ask why they're doing what they're currently doing.
I just assign it to Roberto and it's his problem.
Yes. Hashtag letterbox. This is how I trigger Roberto so easily. Yeah, just
Speaking of large screen, can we do the insects, the insects, because it's really triggering me that it goes behind the... I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
This has been 57 minutes, right?
I know. I resisted until now, but now it's getting difficult.
Okay.
He's having a stroke, so if you can fix it, it's gonna be helpful for me because he's my supervisor now, so I really need him.
All right, so I added one thing here. So that's just the safe drawing padding, which is better, but there's still this cutoff here at the top. So one thing to note is that in this freeform windowing environment, this top inset here is actually not a status bar or a navigation bar, but it's a caption bar, which is another form of system bar that is the top kind of title bar in a freeform window. So that's another inset to be aware of that we're running into. So I did the very simple thing, which was a safe drawing padding, which doesn't completely go edge to edge for the content inside. We can go down that route if we want to.
No,
make
it's
this
fine. It's
a bit.
fine.
That's fine. It's fine.
This is
I'd
good
actually
enough
like to
for
get-
now. For now.
I actually like to get to testing if we have time,
Yes.
because we never get to testing. We should always go to testing.
You have half an hour. So
Half an hour. Okay. So one last thing adding in was animated pane. So by surrounding our detail pane and our list pane an animated pane, then we get animations as we swap between the list and the detail. And then if we are showing both, then we don't have those animations because we're not swapping which ones are available. So that's a quick way to get kind of a default animation between when the list is showing and the detail is showing, swapping between the two. And this is pretty close to being it. Like, you can kind of keep building on this, like adding UI in each of the list pane and the detail pane based on this scaffold value. Actually, maybe that's one thing we could show. Like, based on the scaffold value, you can figure out which ones are visible. So one thing that you should do is, like, right now, when you're currently selected on something, there's no way, there's nothing indicating which one you have selected.
Mm-hmm.
So you can add a background if the selected one is, if the selected item is the currently, if the item in the list is the currently selected detail that's showing, and you actually are showing the detail as well as the list, if that makes sense. So you can do that with if our current selected destination is the index and the navigator.scaffold value.
Okay, so the value is keyed to the pane, right?
So the value contains basically, there are 3 panes and it tells you which ones are visible at that moment in time. One of the quirky things is since underneath it is a 3-pane scaffold, it just has 3 panes and those panes don't have meaning. But within the list detail pane scaffold, there's a list, a detail, and an extra pane, versus the supporting pane scaffold calls them different things, but it's still just 3 panes. So if you use this scaffold role that Alex is using here, that's the easier way. So you don't have to remember what's primary mean in this context. You can just say, is the list there? I know what a list is.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. You know, in every Compose project that I create, I always end up defining a then if function that takes a boolean and an action with a modifier parameter receiver. I don't know why that's not in Compose.
Yeah, it's like it saves like a little bit of indentation in characters.
Yeah, and it's also something you always end up using. But I guess there's probably like they don't want to commit to that sort of API.
All right, so this looks beautiful. This is absolutely not
it's
100%
accessible.
material approved.
Yeah, no, this is not accessible. Not only for the color, it's also not actually like selectable from a semantics point of view. But which one is selected, we can then see. And then if we resize down and then go back, now it's not selected because we're on the list here and we haven't really selected anything. So that's kind of the logic here is if our currently selected destination is that item and the list is expanded and the details expanded, then apply blue background color. Otherwise, don't apply anything.
I see.
So there's more work to do here. Make it semantics.
Yeah. You would have selectable and background and a bunch of other stuff.
Yep.
Probably text color, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Fully selectable list item versus
Yeah.
not selectable. And yeah. All right. Is that everything for Ian that I think we want to show here? We can jump to testing.
Yeah, I think so.
Nice.
All right.
Let's do testing. Yay.
All right. Let's do the classic thing of copying an old test and hoping it works.
As long as nothing's injected in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If there's no heal involved.
Why am I not getting my syntax highlighting?
It says off on the top right, so it's probably just stuck.
Broken.
Yeah. Close and reopen the file. Sometimes that works.
Maybe it's because I'm in a build variant.
Not today.
I don't know.
Actually, I think it might be that. Let me swap back. I also had to deal with the build variants because the plugin is very helpful and only creates your list of licenses if you're on a production build, which is kind of what you probably normally want, but makes it slightly harder to test this exact thing.
I see.
Okay, now we got syntax highlighting, and I can click run buttons, hopefully.
Woohoo.
Okay, let's delete all this old stuff from the other file. Do you want to talk through, Ian, while I'm starting to get some stuff set up of like why testing could be difficult here?
Yeah. So it gets right back into all the user behaviors we're talking about. Of you have to think through these scenarios. So it's really easy to think through if a single pane is displayed, when this is clicked, change to this other pane and show this content. Now, when back is pressed, switch to the previous pane, show this list content. That's pretty easy to write a test for. But as soon as you start thinking about those other scenarios of, okay, well, what about when you do navigate to just the details pane and then you expand the window size? Well, now I need to handle that. And now you need to know kind of think through your hierarchy of like what is shown and where is it in the hierarchy. It's really, I guess Alex will show us some of the tricks or techniques to making it a bit easier to think through. How do you look at just the pieces that you care about? Because thinking through the entire context of the device that it's running on and all the possible configuration changes and how they affect what's visible in that moment or not visible. And if you're doing this in a unit test versus actually running it on device, that can become very challenging very quickly.
Yeah, so one thing I'm going to do is I'm not actually going to use the view model itself for simplicity, but you absolutely could. And then you just have to deal with putting hilt stuff in tests, which you can do. Why don't I have the result?
Does not like Kotlin.result for some reason.
We have a different result in this project.
Check the
Okay,
import.
there it is.
Did it import the right one?
This is a weird thing with Kotlin. If you have the default one, it doesn't need an import, but if you have it, it doesn't let you manually import the other one because, I don't know.
Yeah, because I've already resolved the correct one.
Yeah,
for you.
exactly.
Yeah, it resolved the
else do
correct
you need?
default one. All right. Okay, so we're going to set the content with licenses result. Then we can do something like we can assert that a node with text. We can check that our library name that is displayed. So this should be true no matter what. like assert exists, assert is displayed. So this one should be true no matter what. Like when you start on the screen, you should always be seeing list no matter what window size there is. So this should always work. If I run it.
I like your confidence.
Famous last words. This should always work. But like Ian was saying, other things that we start testing is now dependent on our window size itself. Like we expect behavior to be different on a tablet versus a phone. Oh no. It's I don't care about that test. Try again. I think I changed the settings dialog to set up this project and didn't fix the test before starting.
Yeah. You can also delete the test. We don't care. It's fine. We won't tell anyone.
I'll just delete all tests and then open a PR.
Yeah. Except for the one you're writing, because that's the only important one.
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you mean open a PR? You just force push master.
Yeah.
I think that's disabled for this project. I really hope that's disabled for this project.
You can push
no,
even if you don't force push.
They are the only one way to try to find out, right?
Okay, so shows library name. So one of the tricks that we can do, this is a new thing that's in 1.7 of Compose, is device configuration override. So this is a testing API that allows overriding some stuff that's very useful for tests that are a lot of things that are in configuration that are kind of device specific. So one thing we can do is we can set a specific size that we force for the UI. So I'll set a DP size for compact width. So let's say that's just 400 DP by 400 DP as an example. And then we will put our licenses route inside of there. So what this will do is the content under test, our licenses route, will now be given 400 DP by 400 DP to render in. And this will almost work, but one thing we have to do is hoist the window adaptive info. So this will set the available space for the composable, but it won't override kind of the overall window size, which I think kind of makes sense. It might be nice to override that too in some way. Maybe that's a future thing we could do. But like you could have a composable rendering in a certain amount of space, and that could be arbitrarily different from the overall window size that we have. But for testing, we can hoist it out and then pass it into the directive. So this is creating the directive from the current window adaptive info, which contains information like the window size. So if we hoist that out, we can then arbitrarily specify it in a test in this case. So if I do window adaptive info here, we can then do window size class, and then I can do DP width and float. So I'll just pass in the same. So in this case, I am setting the amount of space that's available in Compose to be precisely the same as the overall window size, which is useful for testing, but may not always be true in general, depending on your overall UI setup. So with these two things, we're now going to render the license route in a fixed amount of space and manually set our window size to be what's computed from 400 DP high, 400 DP wide. So now, because we're setting this test is nicely independent of what device you're actually running it on and its orientation. So if I then, we have Material3 Adaptive, and then I perform click, now we should be able to test that this one doesn't exist anymore because we've gone away from the list. And we should now check that our detail should be displayed because we're on a compact width. So we should only see either the list or the detail at a time. So now this test should ideally work. And if we're quick about it, maybe we can see it happen. Hey, it passed. Let me add some debugs so that we can actually see what's happening. So again, I'm testing on the desktop emulator for ease of, well, it's just the same one I had running, but we could run this on a tablet or phone. So if I do debug, so we have a window here, and then this is showing our list, and then window management. So then we perform our click, which will then, it happened, but we don't see it yet. So then it's going to open the detail, and then we're going to see our list, and then the Material3 Adaptive has gone away. 2.0 is now displayed. So this is one way. This is testing the compact width setup. But if I copy this test, we can then do the other way. So at an expanded width, we should expect to see both the detail and list at the same time. So now if we do the same steps, expand width shows list and detail, meaning if we're on Material3 Adaptive and perform click, now this should still be displayed, and this should now be displayed.
Do you need to also change the window size class?
Yes. Thank you. So now if we run this one, I'll again do debugging. So we have Material3 Adaptive here.
Is it running the write test?
Nope. No, it is not. Thank you. Let's run the correct test this time. Okay. One thing, this is going to be so hard to see. Can I zoom in a ton? So one thing that's kind of funny is you can see right now that this is very shrunk text.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's much smaller than it was before. And then if I click, where's the debug menu? If I advance,
Yeah.
now we've clicked on it. And then we can see now that our thing is shown up and our details shown up here. But if I zoom back out, this is like super shrunk down. And so this is kind of revealing how it's working under the hood here. But if I let it run all the way through, it should pass properly.
Is that using the test harness?
It is using what test harness became, which is merged in upstream device configuration override.
Okay.
But yes, it's using the same principle.
We had 3 years back, Jose talking about the test harness, and I remember that we were seeing small stuff. They're like, aha.
Yes, this is finally, I got it merged in to upstream. So these device configuration overrides should be available in 1.7 of Compose to use. So force size is the one here. There's also ones for locale, layout direction, font scale, font weight adjustment, dark mode, round screen versus not round screened if you're on where.
I need to see if this is available on desktop as well. Because then I can test, because, on desktop you need this as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so what's really powerful about this is we have now a single set of tests that are testing both the configuration for a compact width and an expanded width. And it's doing it in one test of the run. And because of the density overriding that it's doing here, you can run all of these tests on a single emulator in a single test run. You don't have to run some of these tests on some emulator that's a phone and then run a different set of tests on a different emulator that's a tablet. And now make sure that you're actually running your entire suite of tests on at most once or at least once on them. Or another route that you could go down which we have APIs for, but is also kind of complicated, is like trying to impact the emulator itself in your test, like rotating the device from a test or changing the window size from a test. Like there's Espresso device that lets you do some of that, which is valuable in its own right because you can like change features of the emulator from a test. But this allows you to kind of locally override for content to enforce a very specific size that you want to test on, and then have a single test run that does all the combinations that you're interested in testing.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so I was just going to call out here, the types of things you would probably test are specific to your portion of the code. So like we would want to add the semantics to say the thing is selected now. So that's the type of thing you would want to test here.
Yes. Like,
yeah, you would have assert is selected.
Yeah. And this will fail because we didn't actually do these semantics correctly.
We have a couple of questions in the chat.
I have 6 in my queue, and given we have like 5 to 10 minutes left, maybe we can get to the questions now.
Yes,
sounds good.
I'll let you folks decide who's gonna answer what. So the first one is, why does small device and medium device in the emulator have the same DPI, and why does the Pixel Foldable and tablet have the same DPI? I think that's Mike that was having some issues because it ended up selecting the same classes for different scenarios, where it was probably expecting different UI to be shown in different scenarios.
So if the person does mean DPI, then that's just the density of the display. So not the number of pixels, but within a given inch, how many pixels are there. So that's just relevant for how big a thing is. So if you have an image that's 10 pixels by 10 pixels on a super dense display, it's going to be really tiny. And on a non-dense display, it's going to be really big. With the scales of manufacturing, all the different display types, LCDs and LEDs and everything have converged a bit towards similar densities. So even across different physical screen sizes, we do see more similar densities. But all of this adaptive stuff is essentially based on density independent pixels. So how physically big is the window that this thing is in? So you for showing 2 panes, you want physically enough space there to actually make it meaningful for the user to be able to see 2 panes. So you can think on a typical phone, no matter how many pixels there are, if the phone's only 3 inches wide, like it's probably never going to make sense to show 2 panes side by side.
Which follow-up question, I guess, from Ivan. Can you decide the breakpoints, or are they set and fixed?
Yes, you can decide the breakpoints. You can also choose to use other data other than breakpoints. If you can show the directive. So the directive uses this logic here that Alex is pointing out, but you can calculate this however you want. So in theory, you can change those breakpoints and use something else, or you can even do things like only premium users can see 2 panes at the same time, or whatever your
bravo. Now we are talking. Like, just put the money on the table if you want this thing to be adapted.
You have a tablet, you're rich. You can pay for this.
Yep.
Exactly. You can afford 2 panes.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking 2,000 euros foldable, man. I don't care.
A better thing would be maybe there's a user setting somewhere that's like, I really prefer only 1 pane always. Like, I can disable 2 panes or something. That would be a better usage of that.
As a UX person, I would say that's not a choice you're allowed to make.
No. Well, we can put it in the settings under the premium section.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Oh, sorry. Do you want 1 pane? Yeah, sure. $7 per month. Don't care.
I don't think anyone is gonna pay for that, Ivan.
Yeah, man. The only one way to know is to put it there, Sebastian.
There's also another related question, which is actually the last one we got, which is, if window size class computation is handled by Material, why do we need this test? And I guess because we can customize the the directive, and then we can choose when things change, right?
Yeah. So the way I think about it, well, one, you as the developer always decide how much do you trust the code that you're relying on. Fortunately, with Android X, you can go and look at what tests we have, and we already have a bunch of these tests. So realistically, you wouldn't test like, is it showing 2 panes if it's expanded? Is it showing 1 pane if it's compact? Because we have those tests. But you would test the things like, you did add a selector, and you want to make sure the selector is only showing if both the list and the detail are displayed. So you would add tests for that kind of logic that's custom to your app. Or like we're saying, if you're changing the breakpoints or changing what causes a split between, you would test that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing you can test is, this is just normal composable code. You can like say like size is a mutable state, and then start off with like this DP size, and then you could also test directly like whenever this changes, and you could like run stuff, check some things, update the size, then check more things to also verify some of those. When the window size changes, is everything working properly? Which again should work if you're writing everything correctly.
So here you would be able to test that when you resize, then the selection goes away, for example, because you're only seeing 1 pane at a time.
Right.
Got it. Another question is, do we need Material 3 for this, or is Material 2 okay as well?
Yeah, maybe I think for these 2 scaffolds, the pane ones, they don't supply any design elements. They just use the Material 3 sort of rules about pane sizes and gutter sizes. But the navigation suite scaffold is specific to Material 3 because it uses the Material 3 tokens for all the color values.
Does this stuff come in its own dependency that people can use, or I don't know if it's like a standalone artifact or not?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I can show directly. So there's the list detail pane scaffold is layered out. So this is also useful if you only want to have maybe certain parts. So there's adaptive, which is kind of the most building block layer. That's where the window size class is, the window adaptive info calculation methods are. The layout is what actually includes the list detail pane scaffold and supporting pane scaffold itself. And then navigation includes the navigator and that logic. So if you wanted to fully own all the navigation stuff and you wanted to control all that yourself, you could get rid of this dependency and use that with your own code, with your own navigation setup, if you so choose. And then you just have the list detail pane scaffold. And then you'd be responsible for all the navigator type logic. And if you don't want to use list detail pane scaffold at all, you just want to use like the window adaptive info for the window size, calculating the window size class, then you could get rid of that and just use this one. And this one doesn't depend on Material 3. None of these do. But like Ian said, the navigation suite scaffold does, because it uses the Material 3's version of navigation bar, navigation rail. So it does depend on.
But you could technically implement that for Material 2 if you wanted, by copy pasting stuff and changing as appropriate.
Yes.
At your own risk, obviously.
Yeah, if you want more code that you'll have to change at some point in the future. I will say, so we kind of glossed over just the adaptive part here because we're mostly working with the big pieces, but that has calculate posture, collect folding features as state, current window adaptive info that we use, and current window size. So all of those are very useful building blocks when you want to make UI decisions to do something adaptive. And it doesn't have to be related to showing panes. It could be maybe you want to show more padding based on something. So those are all useful. But yeah, it's purposely split up into these different layers, so you can choose, how big or small do you want to go.
A question that is somewhat related, but also not, is that is window size classes available for Views?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So the window manager core library has all the window size classes, and that's actually what this is using under the hood.
Cool. Last two questions. One is from Ivan, because he has many questions. What are some common pitfalls that people should avoid, and is there any? Well, I think best practices we've covered, but what do you see people screwing up? If anything, I mean,
I'm clumsy. No, but for the question was from the beginning of the episode, so probably a few things we covered already. But my idea is like, shooting myself in the foot, and what should I look for? Like, maybe starting from a tiny isolated screen is one way to get the ball rolling, and then from there that's what I got from from you.
Yeah, I'd start with something like that, especially something like the license screen is a good example, or settings are good examples where this list detail pattern is pretty well known, and those screens are fairly isolated, so it's easy to make changes. If you try to go big right away, like say you throw list detail pane scaffold as the main part of your UI, and then you're like, oh, within details, I want to have my own nav graph that can go to 50 different things, you're going to run into lots of pain because the details pane isn't going to be composed all of the time. So your nav graph won't always be composed, which means it won't work. And if you switch between window sizes, you'll run into more problems. So start small and work your way through it. All of this library is intended so that you can override kind of any piece of it. But it's easiest to start, like, do the very basic thing, get it functioning like we did here, and then start tweaking it. Like, okay, well, now it's working. Now I want to change the spacing between the panes. I'll override just that piece. Or now maybe for my particular UI, my list is really skinny. So actually on a medium width, I can show 2 panes. And so I'm going to override that.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think the like case that we know is really difficult is like if you have your current app with a list destination that is like using Navigation Compose or another navigation library that is completely separate from your detail destination. Like they're completely separate places you can navigate to with your overall navigation component. Combining them and doing something like this is hard. Like it's just hard. Like this is one piece to make it easier, but like that is not the easiest place to get started for sure.
And then we have one last question, and then we can wrap up, which is, will the Now in Android app will be continued with KMP?
I've seen that issue. I think there's a PR that community contributors pushed into it. I've heard things internally of like ideas, so it's being considered, but I can't say anything more than that.
I would imagine it at least Compose Multiplatform 1.7 needs to land before you have all these APIs, and then you can use them in the app, right? Until then, it's
it's also like a how much to convert question, which I think is like the big question in the room for KMP in the first place, is how much do you do multi-platform?
And there's also the how worth is it question, which is not, I mean, in many cases for production apps, it might be worth it, but maybe for a demo app, maybe not.
Yeah, one of the challenges making sample apps is always deciding like how complex do you go? Because in the real world apps, you have to go complex because you always have new feature requirements. But the whole point of a sampler demo app is to show off specific things. And so anything beyond that that you add makes it more complicated to show off those specific things. But with now in Android, we do try to add a lot more than the other samples so that we can show how these things interact and do create real world complexity. But yeah, it's always a trade-off of how real do you make it? Because if it's too real, then I'm sure a lot of you have worked with code bases that you wouldn't want to share and tell other people to learn from. So yeah, trade-off.
One last question from, I already know the answer to this question, but this is still experimental. Are you able to give any idea on how long it will take to be stable?
I'd say there's two parts to that question. So the library itself, 1.0 for the list pane and the supporting pane is in beta now. So it's getting close. We're basically just doing bug fixes now. The navigation, since it's part of Material 3, is part of, I think it's 1.3 beta now. So it should also be very close. But the other part of the question is the experimental annotation, which is the more complicated one, because we want to add more behavior to these, but we're still making some decisions on those. So I don't think we can give any sort of confident date on when the experimental annotations would go away, unless Alex wants to be on the hook for having his name tied to a date that people ping him about.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Well, we tried. Okay, folks, we are at time, so thank you very much. Great job on this. I am very excited to see there's finally an easy way to do this stuff. Because I mean, you could, as a single developer in your own app with your own small set of requirements, it's probably not impossibly difficult to do this. Apart from the backstack behavior, I can imagine that would be a pain. But the fact that you folks took the time to make it as flexible as possible, designing it in a way that people can customize it as they want, hopefully not too much, because, you know, customization is a double-edged sword. But it's really cool. And I'm super excited that Compose makes it possible. And the library makes it easy. So cool. Any parting words, Ivan?
Thank you for another episode. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everybody in the chat for the questions. If you have any more questions, you can reach out on Telegram or on Twitter or on Mastodon. Just let us know. We are very happy to go on a break, because this is a very hard way of living. So we need a break. It's going to be some summer break. We are going to be back about end of September.
End of September. It was supposed to be mid-September, but I just learned that I need to be away for work, so it's going to be end of September.
I mean, the sooner we stop working, the better, Sebastian.
Hey, I'm going to get to see Alex in person, so there's that.
Fair enough.
And Ian as well, if you're over there? I don't know.
I don't know yet.
We'll see. We'll find out.
So thank you for the support. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe and like the video. And yeah, thank you for the episode, right, guys. And thank you for the live coding and the answers.
It was great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Happy summer. Oh, yeah, we have DroidCon London. Even you put a t-shirt on just to remember that you have to give away discounts. And then I'm the one reminding you.
To remember that you look at the t-shirt. How I'm supposed to look at the t-shirt and remember? This doesn't make any sense. So thank you for remembering.
I remembered. So
yeah, thank you for remembering. It worked. It worked. Just it worked. You can't say even it worked, right? Without
yes.
Anything.
Fine.
Without the drama. One more successful idea by Ivan. Come on. So if you want some discount code for DroidCon London, just reach out. It's gonna be like 15% off. and we have still a few of them. Reach out on Telegram, or probably Sebastian is just gonna throw it in the chat or whatever.
Sure. Let me
Well,
find
I
it.
mean, so just if you want to save some money, Sebastian is gonna be there. Maybe, probably I'm gonna be there as well in October, right?
I don't know.
Well,
I wasn't
whatever.
listening to
Anyway.
you, so I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So eventually we will make it. So
Sorry,
yeah,
I was getting the discount code, so I put it in the chat.
Yep. Here you go. So again, thank you a lot, and have a nice summer.
Bye bye. Have a great one. Bye, folks.